Okay, it looks like we're streaming live on YouTube, and here we are for Goddess Vibrations, a spiritual sexual empowerment show. Today, I have Tara Cridland, a women's sex coach, on my show. I know you don't just coach on sex, but that's what I love about you is when we talk about those topics. So that's why I say that. But I know you coach, your work goes much deeper to women's empowerment and relationships, and I'm getting the beautiful experience right now of being your guinea pig, and I'm loving it. We're going to trade some hypnosis and that, which we've done before as well. But we've been knowing each other for a while, and so I'm really excited to bring you on here live and introduce you and share you with everyone else, because I feel like you're my little secret. High-powered sexuality conversations, the stuff that like even other women are afraid to say to other women is what we talk about. And I love that. And we'll see where we go today, because we are being watched and censored somewhat, I guess. I already had my Instagram post being taken down, but we are going to be talking about female anatomy, finding your power in your pussy. Pussy, 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 pussy. There, get it out of the way. Now everybody can stop being reactive about that word. I'm over it. I'm tired of it.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because pussy really is connected to pussycat, but female cat, or cats in general, have always been related to sexuality and women and femininity. So that's where that really stems from, is pussycat being the feline, being the part of you that's the most feminine and sleek and powerful. And so, it's really funny that it's such a charged word. And, but some of the other anatomical terms, or just the actual meaning of them, you have to like kind of take ownership of that. But the actual meaning of them, like pudendum, is actually Latin for shame, shameful. So, our parts have been named after these men back in the, 300, 400 years ago that said, oh, it's inward, so it must be shameful, must not be seen by others. So already back then we starting to close us up and put us in the background and put all of our very important parts of our body and our power in the darkness. So,
which is such a shame, pun intended, because what we were talking about is, before we went live, is that testosterone, you told me, you shared this beautiful piece of research with me, that males' testosterone goes up, did you say by 8% just by being next
8% just by being next to a woman. And so if a man goes into a room with women, he immediately has a higher testosterone by 8%.
Yeah, so let us be women. Let us be women. Let us be in our femininity, so that it's only be chivalrous, be masculine, be a gentleman, be these things that allow your testosterone. It's good for you too. Like, allow your testosterone to go up. So as we're listening, or as we're going through the show, and we're talking about female anatomy and finding your power in your pussy, we're going to be talking about that ownership, like you said, but also like, how does this benefit men? Not that that's the reason for doing this, but we are into extraordinary relationships, and whether it's heterosexual or homosexual or whatever. And I've had homosexual men reach out to me on the show and say, thank you for that show, that was amazing, because so much of what we're talking about is feminine energy and not necessarily assigned to a woman. But obviously we're talking anatomy. This is going to be a show about female anatomy, but I don't even know what I'm in store for. I just know that every time I talk to you, something really valuable that you don't find in a textbook or even on Google or anywhere else. So where do we start? Where do we go? And I want to say too, to anybody watching live, which I did not really do much promoting of the show, given the rowdiness of this past week, energetically and astrologically and all of the things. But if anybody happens to jump in live and you want to ask Tara a question or us a question as we go, please put it in the chat, because we're happy to answer your questions here. And this is a stellar opportunity, and I'm hoping she comes on again soon in the future, but she's busy building her amazing, luxurious international life. So we don't know what the future holds yet for us.
Well, I always have time for you. You. I think the most powerful thing is so I've always had a lot of I was very lucky because my parents were very open around sexuality, and it was just normal and natural. And the body was normal and natural. But even with that being said, I didn't really get anatomy lessons from even now. My first introduction to sex and sexuality, really like academically speaking, was my parents had the Joy of Sex book. So that I don't even know if that's in most people's homes anymore because we have the internet now, but it was this amazing book that was talking about the joy of sex and had all these pictures in it and ways to have fun and play and how to have good sex. And so I remember seeing that, like, and that and my dad's Hustler magazines he used to hide in the garage. So, but he knew I was taking them. He knew I was curious, and he was so proactive and wonderful as this beautiful, like, healthy masculine man to say, hey, I know you're looking at this stuff, but if you have any questions, come to me so I give you the correct information. You don't get it from your friends where it's wrong. Mm-hmm. And he said, I just ask you to keep that book out in the living room. So should I need it? So it was like this non-shaming of, yes, it's okay to learn. Yes, it's okay to explore. Yes, it's okay to actually figure out this natural part of our being, and even my mom, she was more shy, but still very open and very, answer whatever questions I had. But then usually dad was the sex expert in the house. So she'd be like, oh, that's a great question. I don't know if I know that one, but dad knows, go ask dad. So just being really fortunate and not realizing that this was not a blessing for other women, not even close. And so just coming from that space of like, wow, how lucky was I to have that?
Well, that explains a lot. And it's really bring that up too, because the post that got deleted, that I was talking about that I posted on Instagram, I did not delete it, by the way. It was deleted.
Yes.
But I was exploring.
That's what shit at its finest.
I was just exploring the same history. I'm like, how did I get to be where I'm at? Like of curious and interested in sexuality research. And I know, there's a paucity of research. Like there's not enough on female sexuality research. I'm learning more from you than I am from any of the academic journals that I am allowed access to as a PhD student at Saybrook University.
Yeah.
So that's interesting right there.
Yes. There's actually a great book. There's several great books, but one's Women's Anatomy of Arousal. That's a fantastic book for anyone who's beginning to explore who they are and their parts. Mm-hmm. And I'll have to come up with some other, the books will come to me, they always do. But one of the books that I love, it actually talks about the case of the disappearing clitoris. In the Greek times, 300 years ago, they actually had accurate depictions and pictures and descriptions of a women's anatomy. And over time, also that just started disappearing. Even now, sex education in schools, it addressed the men's anatomy and how all that works. But all the women, young girls, all they're getting is women have menstrual cycles and they have babies. There's nothing about our pleasure organs.
Yeah, and it's like, depending on the culture you live in, they either burn all the books about it or they just literally just cut off the clit, right? Like just cut it off. Like cut
right. They burn the books, they cut off clit, or they just it just kind of gets so watered down that it's just like, oh, there's hair there. And that's all anyone knows about it. And the realization for me of how powerful it was for this work to be done, that why I was in this path was I've always had that knowledge that this was where I'm supposed to be heading. However, was when we were in school, womenly arts. Mm-hmm. And I had a realization, we had 600, almost 700 women in that room. And over 40% of them had never even looked at their vulvas. Mm-hmm. There was a moment where a bunch of them raised their hands and said they've never even looked at themselves. They had no clue what they looked like between their legs.
Yeah. And I think almost every single one of the women in there had experienced some sort of sexual abuse. So somebody else had looked or touched.
Yeah.
And they hadn't even had that opportunity or pleasure or, permission or whatever. But it's like, everybody else have your go ahead and help yourself. But, can we own our anatomy? Are we allowed to say the word describing our body? Are we allowed to define what we want to call our own damn body? All of these things. You can tell I'm a little bit fired up. Maybe it's the red leather dress too, but
possibly
activating with your red couch. And it's just like,
yes,
fire.
Red hair.
Yeah. But, for me too, I have a similar story to yours where I'm mostly Scandinavian. So my heritage is mostly Scandinavian. So even though I grew up in a small Midwest town, I feel like my parents were pretty open about sex compared to most maybe parents
Yeah.
around. And yet I did not have any education on sexual pleasure. I was told where babies came from when I asked when I was about 3 years old. So that was great. And then I remember like some Dr. Ruth book, probably, that explaining more about it, and then puberty. And I remember being really interested in puberty and all the changes. And I was a late bloomer. So I was like, what's going to happen to me? And I was just fascinated with everything feminine, right? Like the
Yeah.
puberty, the birth, all of the things that happen. And then naturally sex as well. And nobody teaches a woman how to enjoy it. And you learn from movies, and then you end up learning from, oftentimes the young men that you're being sexual with, where are they learning? Usually from porn. And then we have this problem. And now, this was back in the 90s, but now it's thank goodness for things like Instagram or Google or YouTube, but it's still hard to find good quality information. I've already had it with my daughter where I'm like, she's naturally curious, and I'm like, whoa,
Yeah.
whoa, whoa, not there. Here's the kind of like what your dad did. Like, here's this book.
Yeah.
Here's this book. Like, they're right there on the shelf. They're on the open. I don't even hide them, because I don't feel like they need to be hidden. It's not like I have them on the coffee table either, but they're there. If you can find out where my purse is and where the iPad is or whatever, you can
Yeah.
put it on the shelf.
Yeah. And it's really important to actually, I'm going to touch on that because that is a realization that I had a few years back. I mean, I'm 46 and I actually started having sex at a young age out of curiosity, because even with all the information my dad was giving me, he didn't have all that information either, because a women's anatomy was not published it was very hard to find that information, right? And so there was still this like question, like, what does it feel like? And meeting my boyfriend and having these experiences. And I look back at my first sexual experiences when we barely had TV. The TV cable was just coming around. I remember actually used to stay up late and watch Real Sex on HBO, which was a great series. And I would sneak back in and turn it down low and watch. So I learned about all these different fetishes and everything. And but besides that, you didn't have the internet. You didn't have phones. You didn't have internet. You didn't have computers, really. I mean, we had computers, but they were the old like HTTP : so you had to put all that in, and it was just coding. It wasn't actually like the Windows that everyone experiences today. We didn't have these search engines, and I laugh at myself because I'm like, oh my God, I become my mother. I'm like, back in the day, but in reality, I have seen such a shift, like huge shift. And my lovers back then were actually better. And what I mean by that, like when I mean a conscious man is amazing, but the general population, they were better because it was about exploring each other's bodies to learn. And there wasn't any framework for it where the porn says, yeah, slap the woman, bend her over and just do her. It was actually about like, wow, let me look at this. This is cool. Does it feel good when I do this? What about this? So it was like the experiences have changed, and I've noticed that the quality. And so there's a lot of reports. One of the reasons why I really decided to get certified in this is because I have so many young friends that are in their early 20s that come to me like, sex is terrible. I hate sex. It's no fun. And a lot of that has to do with lack of education. So, with the female anatomy, if I just want to touch on that, well, and if anyone who's a woman wants to check themselves out, we can't see you, go ahead and take the moment, go grab a mirror, take your pants off. And just take a look. And what I've changed some of my own meanings because there are certain words that have charge around them or have meanings that are historically negative in connotation. And so I love to actually call our outer side. So when you first look at yourself, for some women, you have hair, some don't, whatever you choose. And that's number one. I really want to touch on that. Whatever you as a woman feel the most juicy, sexy, and comfortable, whether you have a full bush, whether it's trimmed, whether it's waxed, that you do it for your own pleasure and not because someone else told you to. That you play with that and actually check in with what feels the best to you, what makes you feel really yummy. And and just recognize that that's actually okay. You don't have to remove your hair because society says so. And actually a lot of gynecologists and doctors are starting to really put a lot of literature out there begging women to stop removing their hair because it's actually causing more damage than good. I choose to wax, but even so, I know, and there's times when I go through and I just let it all grow and I leave it alone. And none of my lovers that are conscious have ever had complaints. So that's number one. You see the hair, all of those hair follicles in your pubic area. All of those hair follicles are, each one of them is attached to a nerve ending. Unlike any other hairs, it actually has a nerve ending. They're erotic. So when they're touched, stroked, gently tugged on, that's actually part of the erotic experience. Not only that, but it's also
so well timed as we're coming out of lockdown in California and we're all
everyone's just like, let it grow. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. You know, and that if you think about this, that we are animals too. And the human beings, that's how we attract our partners, is that our hair in our armpits, our hair in our pubic area, it actually traps our hormones. It has those chemicals that are called pheromones that go out there. And so your partner senses that, even if they don't know they smell it. And one of the things that's really fun about that is that a lot of people don't realize that if you are a good genetic match, which means you have enough differences in your genetics that whatever offspring you make will be genetically strong, you'll immediately love the smell of that other person. Even when they're sweaty, you'll like their smell. And as a woman, he'll smell even more delicious in his stinky sweat when you're ovulating, when you're actually at your fertile stage ready to make a baby. You know, and even though you don't want children, this is like scientifically like where we stand with our attraction. So by putting on perfumes, removing the hair, birth control is a huge factor of actually not picking a partner that's really physically and scientifically genetically matched with you. And so a lot of women that are on birth control get married to the partner, and then when they go off to have children, and they're not attracted to them anymore.
Oh, wow. Because the hormonal shifts are changing their pheromones?
Right, because what happens is when you're taking the hormones and the birth control pill, it actually makes your body think it's pregnant. When you're pregnant, you don't need to be attracted. You're actually, now what you're looking for in a partner is you're looking for the man who's that's going to take care of the baby, right? So you're looking for that nurturing partner that's going to actually take care of the baby, take care of you, protect you during that time. And this is all, you know, primal. It doesn't mean that it's valid for today, but scientifically speaking, our bodies don't know we're in modern age, right? Our bodies are still doing their primal job. And so as a woman who's on birth control, you're going to meet someone who you just love the personality, you love the connection you have, you think they're great. Then you go off the birth control pill and you just don't find attraction to them anymore because they fit all of the criteria to be a nurturing father. But as far as genetically speaking and physical attraction, you weren't able to actually pick up on his pheromones and know that this person is actually maybe not the most genetically matched person with you. Which is why sometimes you meet someone that you're like, I hate him, but oh my God, I'm so attracted to him. Like, why? It's because your chemicals that you actually intermesh, and they think their scientists are believing that this happened because as we started to grow, as we started to have more and more people on the planet, we had different tribes and villages. It was like a natural selector so that you wouldn't accidentally pick a relative. So if someone is very close to the genetic match to you, they have like the same amount of kind of genes, same amount of immunity, like a lot of the things that will cause a weakness in the offspring, then that's going to actually be automatically like, well, you don't smell so good to me because you're too close in a genetic match. So that's, you know, one of the reasons why our pubic hair really helped us pick kind of better partners. And of course, that's not the fashion. In some parts it is. In some parts, actually, they do transplants to give you even more of a bush, and because it's a sign of fertility. So that's the other thing, is understanding that our culture is basically unique to us in certain developed countries, but there's other developed countries that is not the culture. The culture is actually to have like big hairy bush. And if it's not hairy enough, add some more to it so that it really so you look fertile and juicy. So your partner's like, yeah, she's gonna, and and a lot of people don't realize that's what we're doing.
It's kind of
So
interesting,
that's
like even here, we have the labiaplasty or however you say that, where women
right.
actually having their labia like surgically sliced off and removed. And then in other cultures, they have labia pulling where they're making them longer because that's what's considered like
Right.
more sensual, more sexual, and to help a woman be able to squirt is what I learned
Yes.
Conde on, and we were talking about some of this stuff because he studies, African and Brazilian sexuality and culture.
Yes. And that's really important. So as we go into that, so the pubic hair, right? And then the top of it, that spot that a lot of women think, oh, that's too fat, I don't like it, it's very round. It's called the mons pubis, but it's also referred to as the mons Venus.
Mm,
And that is taken after the goddess Venus, the goddess of love. So that is actually there to cushion your pubic bone, right? So as you're having sex and it's getting really juicy and delicious, and maybe you guys are going a little faster, a little harder, that cushions you from not getting bruised and having injury. So that really protects that part of you. So that little mound needs to be there.
mhm.
And it's also just, it creates a little bit more attractive. Like, look what's here. Come and take a closer look.
I've had men say that. They're like, that is like super attractive. And then I've had women friends say, oh, mine's too big. I'm embarrassed of it, that sort of thing. It's
Yeah.
so interesting the different connotations that we have, right?
Right. And also being very conscious and aware of the fact that if that's bigger, maybe your pelvis is shaped a little differently because every body is different, right? So maybe they have a pubis bone that sticks out a little bit further. So they need to have that extra layering for protection. It's functional, it's not just aesthetically. And of course, we're comparing ourselves to what society says we're supposed to look like instead of knowing. And it's really, even that it changes over time. So what is now popular right now, back
Mhm.
in the 1930s, Miss Nude USA was 180 pounds. And they only liked women that had lots of curves
Yeah.
and that were very luscious and looked healthy and could bear children. So, it changes over time. And even now I'm noticing in the last, like 5-10 years, where there's definitely a shift in body attraction, right? Because now it's much more popular to have a nice round booty and nice round hips and nice round. So there's more of this hourglass figure that's once again is kind of coming back full circle, right? So,
I was
that's the first thing.
the original Wonder Woman that I remember watching as a girl. And
Yeah.
and I love that show and everything, but I remember thinking of her as so curvy. I was like, she's just so voluptuous and curvy. And then I just literally watched this about a week ago, and I'm like, oh my gosh, she's so thin. Like she's so thin. Where's the curves?
Right.
So interesting to see like, whoa,
Yeah.
this is the same brain and perception has shifted.
Exactly. So that's one of the biggest things that I really help guide women is to start just loving who they are, because who they are is enough and who they are is juicy and sexy, and that magazine is not real life, and your partner is not going to care about that magazine either. So, that's the first one. It's just really honoring like the pubic hair, wherever it is. And listen, like I said, I wax because that's what feels the best for me. I have very sensitive skin and it just feels nicer for me. But if you're someone who really loves that, honor it, explore it, like embrace it, and don't let someone else tell you what you're supposed to look like.
Mhm.
The next thing, what I really love to refer to is the outer labia and the inner labia, because when you say labia majorum, labia minorum, it really doesn't actually do justice to women, because a lot of women, their inner lips are actually longer or bigger than their outer lips. And that's actually normal and okay too. We
Mm.
just don't get reference. We don't see how many, a prime example of this. So in my office at home, I have this wall that I put all these pictures that maybe strike me or part of my desires. And I have these pictures up there of all these different beautiful vulvas. Like I just print them off and just tape them all over. And one of my neighbors came by for something, and she came into my room and she just was like, oh my God. And she was so embarrassed. And I looked and I said, if that was a penis on the wall, would you have the same reaction? And
Mm.
she's like, no, I don't think I would. I said, yeah, it's all about perception. So the penis is seen everywhere. It's just normal. But to see a vulva is shocking.
Mm-hmm.
And so as a woman, of course, a lot of women are doing altercations and on their vulvas because they don't know, they don't see the vast, beautiful array of all the different vulvas and what's really normal. All we see is what is represented in media and in porn. Most of those women, and I know firsthand because my background is that I was a massage therapist for 20 years and I had a lot of strippers and porn stars as my clients. I came from Las Vegas, and they all told me, number one is they all bleached, and number two, I actually had someone that I was friends with who, she's a graphic designer, and her job is to Photoshop all of the porn movies. So whatever they can't bleach or wax or surgically fix, she goes in and digitally fixes it to make it all perfect, pretty, and pink. So all of that is just completely fake. None of it's real.
Yeah, not that I had any doubts, because my body tells me as soon as it's on the TV, like it's automatically turned off. And I'm like, just
Mhm.
because I'm not attracted to anything fake, including food or whatever else. It's like,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah, there's not just the anal bleaching. They bleach their lips. They surgically alter them. And then if that doesn't work, then they have a graphic designer that goes in and just repaints it though every scene by scene and just makes it look
Good
like,
for your pH either to
oh,
bleach.
no, 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 not at all.
Yeah,
Not at all. Well, and we'll get into that too a little bit later because definitely want to talk about
I
how to
love the
take care of
pH
her.
conversation. Yeah.
Yes,
We
yes.
definitely need to get into that. That's
Yeah.
women need to know.
How to
It's up
properly
with that.
care for them. So yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I like to call it the outer labia because no matter which one is bigger, which one's longer, that one is the outside, and then moving inward is the inner labia, right? What most women don't realize, and this is why I cringe when I hear women are having vaginoplasty, and they're actually cutting, shaving off their inner labia, is because that is innervated. That's all part of your clitoris, right? So you're losing your sensitivity by doing that.
Kind of
And
the
it's,
decision for boys,
yes,
right?
it's
Yeah.
very similar, very similar. So as you come in, you have that little space of the vulva, the pudendum, and then you have the hood,
Mhm.
which is the beautiful part of the skin that covers the clitoris, right? So I've had so many women in my life that I've heard, oh, I don't orgasm because my clitoris is too small. That clitoris is huge, but we'll get into that. So you have the hood. The hood is there to cover the glands of the clitoris. So similar as men, the tip of their penis is called the glans penis. Ours is called the glands of the clitoris, right? So that's that little peak that pokes out from the hood, right? That hood is actually meant to protect because it's so sensitive. We have 8,000 nerve endings in our clitoris. And so it covers that so that it doesn't get overstimulated and have too much sensory because it is so sensitive. That means like tender loving care. So if you're at home and you did take your pants off and you're looking in the mirror, you can actually pull that hood back and see a little bit more of the glands. You won't see the rest, just the glands of that. So that's that little piece. Underneath that hood, if you take your finger and you rub it side to side over the hood, you feel that little like ropey kind of thing. That's actually the shaft of your clitoris, right? So that's actually just like the penis shaft, that's the shaft of your clitoris. So as you get up there, there's a ligament that attaches that to the pubic bone so that it doesn't go flying all over the place, keeps it kind of stable. Then there's the cruciate legs. So the cruciate legs, so you have the shaft, and then you have these legs that go like this. And they go all the way down behind your inner labia, all the way down and innervate your entire vulva. So your entire vulva is your clitoris because that all is part of it. And then you actually have inside those cruciate legs, you have what's called the vestibular bulbs. These are a spongy. So we have just as much spongy erectile tissue as men do. It's just dispersed differently in our body, right? So as you go down, you see the clitoris. Yeah.
Exterior, yeah.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
So, and I'm going to say something that blows people's mind, but I'll get to it in a minute. So, as you go down, you see the cruciate, then you have the vestibular glands, and those actually start to fill up and become aroused as we get more excited, right? So, that's actually starting. What it does is it allows our body to bring that part of us more forward for more pleasure, but it also allows us to accommodate any size penis and makes it all snug and fit, and also brings us extra pleasure by bringing more friction, by bringing it closer to the shaft of the man's penis. Or for any woman who prefers women or whatever, it allows that then, right? So that's the natural primal, but Mother Nature created us all differently, beautifully differently. So if you're a woman who prefers women, or if you're a woman who prefers men and women, or if you're a transgender woman, it's going to be different for you, right? Because it's going to be kind of rerouted surgically, but still it's the same. They still found a way to create that like spongy tissue and all that to still create that pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
So playing, like really lovingly playing with that, your partner can actually, whatever your partner is, your partner can actually gently squeeze along the lips and inside there to kind of start activating the erection of those spongy erectile tissues and start creating that excitement, right? So that's really beautiful. And then inside your urethra is not, so what I like to educate women is everyone's looking for the G spot, right? There's a G spot. Really what it is actually a clitoral cluster. So it's clitoral nerves that actually are like a cluster that surround your entire urethra. And then there's a cluster of those nerves that actually go further out. They think it's just this little spot, but really it's this cluster that's very close. So when women put their finger in to find it, they always stick way in. They're like, I can't find it. It's just inside, like literally one knuckle in. You'll see that there's a part right upside if you're pushing up against your urethra inside your vagina and the introitus. So the introitus is the little opening there. You go inside and you'll feel that there's a spot there that it's kind of rounded, but when you get excited, it actually flattens out. So if you're aroused, you're not going to find it so easy because it's going to flatten out, but it's got little ridges on either side, like a little ditch that has little ridges in it. So that's the sides, and then it's right in the middle. And it's just right inside of that. That's the beginning of your G-spot clitoral cluster, right? So then that actually has this whole body and a tail that goes all the way underneath and into the spongy tissue of the urethra. So as you go down, so you feel the clitoris, and you can run your finger now down, and you'll find the first opening, and that's your urethra opening. So that's the part that the pee comes out. But also, there's a whole entire amount of spongy erectile tissue that surrounds your entire urethra. And that actually gets very aroused and swollen as well when you get aroused. And if you notice when you're not sexually aroused, when someone touches the outside of your urethra, it's kind of sore, and you're like, ooh, don't touch that. But when you're aroused now, it feels so good, right? It's part of like, oh, it feels so good. If you can get a magnifying glass, so a magnifying mirror, because you can look at yourself, right? So get a mirror that's magnified. And you put it in there and you spread that part to look at your urethra. On either side of that urethra are these two tiny, tiny little holes. Those are actually called the Skene's glands. And those Skene's glands are part of female ejaculation. So they actually create fluid. So when a woman gets aroused, and you see that extra fluid, part of what is coming out from us is our ejaculate. We also have a prostate. So they're actually trying to shift the clitoral to G spot, they're trying to shift that into renaming it the female prostate, because they're defining that it is basically a prostate for females. And so inside, you'll see those little tiny, and so a lot of women, when they get super aroused, and you and I both ejaculate, so we know about like it naturally, like this is not the same as urine, but a lot of women don't, so they think they're urinating, and so they hold it in. And that's okay, because it does just reabsorb back into the bladder and go back into the body. So but to be able to allow that to flow, it's just going to expand the pleasure. But it takes time, and it takes giving yourself permission to allow that to happen without shame, which you may have to do some work around. But you have 37 ejaculatory ducts inside of your.
Okay.
Yeah. So we actually have more. So here's the kicker right here. We have more nerve endings in our clitoris. Men only have 4,000. Women have 8,000. We have, I think we have even more than that. We have 37 more ejaculatory ducts inside of our urethra in that spongy tissue than men do. So we have more ability to ejaculate than men. So that's all surrounding the urethra and underneath, and then additionally, those two little glands on either side of the urethra that are a part of ejaculation. So when women get aroused, they'll have like this extra fluid. That's actually ejaculate fluid that's starting to help lubricate the outside of the vulva for penetration. So as you go down now, you follow the inner lips, and where the inner lips actually meet the bottom V right by your perineum, that's called the fourchettes. So that's like just a pretty little name of the fourchettes. So if women want to get technical, that's what that is. And that begins then the introitus, which is, introitus is like the entryway, right? So the entryway to the pleasure. But, and they used to, and so vagina literally in Latin translates to a sheath for a sword. So originally they just thought that it was just for us to accept penis. Now they realize obviously there's so much more involved in the function of our beautiful vaginas, but that's what it means. It means a sheath. So,
which is why we often use the word pussy instead. That's one
right.
reason. Yeah.
Exactly. Not only that, but then if you notice, even doctors say vagina. Well, that's purely referring to only the inside of your vagina. The rest of that is not called a vagina. That's actually your vulva. And it's the pudendum, is all these other terms, right? So to encompass the entire parts of a woman, I like to call it a pussy, because to me, that just encompasses it all. And, who doesn't like petting a pussy?
There you go. All the people that are
even that I have friends that don't like women unless they're drunk, and then they still love petting pussy. So you never know. You never know. Yeah. But everyone comes from one, right? So no one comes from anywhere other than there.
Yeah.
And even if you're born cesarean section, you still have to have the entrance of the sperm going in there to start the creation of you. Mm-hmm. So you have that. You have the introitus. You have all this, right? So this is all pleasure driven. So one thing that women don't realize is that we, unlike men, our clitoris, its only function is pleasure. Mm-hmm. That's it. It has no other function but pleasure. So of course it's and there might be people that get triggered by this, because in religion and society, it's shameful to feel pleasure, shameful to be a woman and want pleasure, shameful to ask for pleasure, shameful to demand pleasure. And yet our anatomy says that we are built to purely feel pleasure. And a man's penis does not have that same. It has 4 different functions to it. Our clitoris has 1, pleasure. That's it. Mm-hmm. That's it.
And we get accused of not being able to focus.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, I don't know how much more focus you can get, but that, absolutely. So as you go inside now, and it's so important, here's the, before you even go inside, it's so important because women don't actually realize this, but it is actually about 11% of the population get vulvar cancer. Wow. And women think because it never goes out there that that's not going to happen, but it does. So it's so important to look at your vulva, at your pussy, at the introitus, at all that parts, to see what it looks like when it's healthy, so that if something has changed, you know the difference. You look at your face every day, right? You look at it to see if you have pimples, if you have wrinkles, if there's a spot you don't recognize from before. You look at your arms. There should be the same habit with your pussy. Mm-hmm. Of looking at it on a regular basis to check to make sure that everything is still looking normal. And normal is not what that is. What do you look like from the start when it's the most healthiest? That's your normal. And then looking at any variations that may happen. As a matter of fact, someone that I lived close to just came back from she was actually over in Illinois, because her mother just had massive surgery because she had vulvar cancer, and they had to remove the entire right side of her vulva. Wow. So all of that has completely been removed surgically because she had cancer in that. So, and who thought to check that, right? Right. Because nobody's educated on that. No one, and women are not educated on their anatomy. Yeah. And so then you go move inside. And also another part is the perineum. So a lot of people like to call it the taint, because the taint the butt, the taint the pussy. It's just right in between. That actually has a perineal spongy tissue as well. So that also is engaged. So for some women like myself, then I get really aroused to have pressure go downward on that. Feels so good. And that in itself sometimes can make me orgasm. Because not only that, but then as that beautiful clitoris has those legs, there's actually nerves that wrap around, and they actually innervate the anus. So the anus is the second, or for some people, the asshole. That's the second most innervated part of a woman's body. Wow. So it's very sensitive, and definitely has a lot of pleasure source as well. And so that's really beautiful. And people don't, a lot of people don't realize that.
Mm-hmm.
As you go inside, now you have the vaginal wall. The vagina itself, so the actual inside, is amazing, right? Because we can actually, as we get more aroused, we get more expansive. We actually get longer. So we are able to accommodate. So when a lot of women said, "Oh, he's just too big," or that's because they're not aroused enough. Because for most women, there are some women that are very small, and that's anatomically not going to change. However, even those women, they're inside of their vagina as they get really truly aroused, which is what doesn't happen most of the time, right? Most women are not really aroused at the level that they need to be to accept penetration. They actually expand and they actually get longer. And the more aroused they get, the longer their vagina gets.
Mm-hmm.
And then we also, I mean, we're able to birth a baby. So we're pushing and even more beautiful, you know, back in the day, they used to do this one extra stitch right outside, this extra stitch. Such BS, because the inside is so magical and it's just all muscle and it just shrinks back down and it goes back in shape and it returns back to its former glory.
Mm-hmm.
For some women, actually, and I'll get into that too. So we go up into the vagina and now you see the cervix. So the cervix is kind of like a cone shape, kind of shaped like that, right? And if women can reach it, some women have really high cervixes, so they can't really reach it with their finger, but some women, like mine's pretty low, so I can go in just half a finger and it's right there. You feel it, and it kind of feels like the tip of your nose, but more moist, right? So you feel that. And that's actually the part. Now, when you're fully aroused, that also opens up. And that can be penetrated and has a lot of pleasure in it as well.
So the cervix opens a bit when you're fully aroused.
Yes, it opens and it can be penetrated and actually activated and you can feel the pleasure.
Okay, well, tell me about these cervical orgasms then. How do you know that you're having a cervical orgasm? Because I know you've referred to that in the past.
Yeah, so so when you go into the uterus, there's these ligaments and the ligaments hold the uterus and they actually wrap around and they attach to the front part of the pubis. Mm-hmm. So right here by the clitoris. So as you're getting that pressure hitting the cervix, right, it's going in like this and touching it, and actually shakes the whole uterus, which then pulls on the ligaments that hold the uterus in place, which then pulls on the clitoris and activates the entire pelvis. So then you have these really deep orgasms because your nerves are innervated all inside as well. So now all the nerves are activated, and that actually gives you these deep clitoral orgasms, these deep cervical orgasms, because it's involving now the uterus, the ligaments, all that is getting involved in this. We also have what's called the eighth spot. It's another spot that's deep inside the vagina, kind of in front of the cervix. So you have the cervix here, and then you have this little spot that's kind of way up in there. And if they can get in there, that also creates these really amazing orgasms, because all that's being pressure and movement on the ligaments and the uterus, and then also engaging the clitoris through that whole area. So a woman's built for pleasure. We have functions too, of course, but we're built for pleasure. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that uterus is beautiful. And then, of course, you have your fallopian and your ovaries that have your eggs. So that's, the full female anatomy. Those everyone knows about, right? We all know about fallopian tubes. We all know about eggs and the ovaries. We all know about the uterus. We don't know about like the pleasure that a woman's actually able to have.
Well, right. And I think that one of the things that is so probably simple to understand if you own this equipment, but difficult for lovers to understand sometimes, is that internally, like you said, we expand, we contract, we can push a baby out, and it's not like giving birth is necessarily a pleasurable experience, but it can happen. It's tough inside there, there's like sensitivity, but when you're aroused and when it's time to go, like you can take a lot of pressure, like a lot of penetration and things like that. However, the outside is so exquisitely sensitive and tender. Yes. And so I think it can be hard sometimes for partners to understand, like outside feather touch, inside just go for it, kind of thing.
Yeah. And if you
time is.
Yeah, and if you think about childbirth, the baby you don't just suddenly have contractions and birth the baby 5 minutes later. It takes hours to days. Why? because the uterus starts to contract. It sends all of these oxytocin and pitocin chemicals that then starts to soften the cervix. It starts to bring the cervix up. It starts to spread the cervix out. It takes a long time. If you think about the process, we have what are like active labor, you know, effacement, all these things for, because I also used to be a doula and help birth babies. So it takes a long process of this labor intense that it, you know, it's intense. Like a lot of women, it's painful, but it's not painful. It's hard work. It's intense. And if you don't know what's happening, of course you get scared and then it becomes painful because you're in fear and tensing. But if you really allow that experience to happen, it takes a while, right? It takes a time for that, for all those chemicals to do their job, for the cervix to soften and open and really allow that baby to come through. It's the same with sex. Our vaginas don't just turn on like that. Now, of course, if you meet someone new and you're super highly attracted for the first like month or two, or maybe 3 months, you're going to have that instantaneous, like, oh, I need you right now. But as you guys get closer, more intimate, your body's not going to get aroused as easy. So intimacy sometimes equals less sex. So as we get more and more intimate, we become less and less sexual. So we have to actually actively create an environment that engages the sexuality, that engages the arousal, that engages that pleasure. And so for women, there are some women who just love rough sex, and that's the way their bodies are made. But with even a lot of them, they still need arousal time. They can't just go right into it.
Right. The movies would tell us otherwise.
Absolutely. Oh, you know, I had this, because I'm technically on vacation, but I've been working this whole time as well as enjoying my environment. And then I'm actually going to come back and I'm moving here. So I'm moving into Mexico. I'm in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. And the universe just opened her legs and said, you're just going to birth yourself right into Mexico. So that's what's happening. Yeah. So I'm just going back, packing up my stuff and moving here. And we'll see what happens from there. But that's the way my life works. It all of a sudden just up and moves me across the country and up and moves me to another country and up and moves me. And every time I up level as well. So it gets scary as fuck when that happens. But then I just up level every single time.
We always talk about how when we get together, we both went up level. And so you are moving to paradise and I'm in a beautiful, amazing relationship. And it's just like, whoa. What how does it get better than this? It's only 2-3 weeks.
And it's because of attaching and really connecting to this power source, your pussy. So not only is it important to know your anatomy, it's important to know the power of this. It's so important to recognize that women have so much power in our pussy, right? That's why we have this patriarchal society now where women don't have as many rights, that women are a property. And because before this, we were egalitarian societies and women were in charge. And the men were actually less stressed. They had healthier bodies. They actually were calm. The societies were more cooperative. Another great book to read on that. A lot of people focus on in this book, it's called Sex at Dawn. They focus on the polyamory part of it, but really what I got from it more than that, you know, is that number one, the definition of polyamory is very different today than it was back in the ancient times. You know, polyamory was that women and men, especially women, they did have sex with multiple partners, but they were in a close-knit group and they were all intimately connected to each other. They weren't just out seeing people. So it was very different than the polyamory we have today. And even with that being said, then you have the polyamory couples who are very much connected and they do have a very similar setup. So, you know, the ones who truly live that lifestyle, they do live more like the way the book is, where it is very closely connected and everyone's in deep communication and they're aware of each other and they are accountable for each other and take responsibility of each other. So the same cooperation used to occur. But what happened is over time, we weren't hunters and gatherers anymore. We became agriculturists. And the men needed to know that their women were birthing their children because they wanted their offspring to inherit their land. So that's where that started stemming from. So how can we have a woman who's totally in power become less powerful than by saying, well, you're my property? Now you have to marry me. Now you have to be pure. You can't sleep with other men. There's no more seeds allowed in you. And there's many, many societies to this day that are not like that. There's societies in Africa, societies in Asia that still very much play into ancient civilizations type of relating, where the women are still having sex with multiple partners for variation of the offspring, and the village understands that this child could be any man's child, and so therefore they take responsibility of raising this child all together, and the women are supported in their choosing of whichever lover they want to have for that night, knowing that this is their power, that this is their body. So very different in that, and just really learning. We definitely, in the US in particular, we definitely have like these strong labels and judgments around what each person's life looks like. Are they polyamorous? Are they bisexual? Are they gay? Are they straight? Are they transgender? Not understanding that in real human nature, this is all natural and normal. This is all a part of a human life. It's not just about procreation. Because if it's just about procreation, why do we have a cliff built just for pleasure? So, we are created in that way to be equally whatever it is that we show up to be and whatever we're born to be. So, I really hope at some time that we no longer have to live by labels, but we can just live our lives as we are without the label. But right now that's necessary. And I guess for society, they need that label, but not to say I'm polyamorous, but I have my cluster of my family, or I have my wife, and my children are raised by me and my wife, and we're both, in our gender, we're female, and that's the other thing, gender. So identifying this is, in the reference to this anatomy, we're talking about cisgender women, right? Women that were born with female parts. That doesn't mean that as a transgender who is now in their right body, that they don't have similar. It's just been surgically created, but very similar. And if it's a good surgeon, then they're still going to be able to look at their vulvas and get a beautiful, so I encourage if there's any women there that had to actually create their body to match their insides to the out, that they still look at their vulvas and really admire the work, and that they are who they're supposed to be now, and really love on that.
And so this is interesting too. I have a long-term friend who started as sort of a non-binary kind of person, is how I met them in the early 2000s. And then around 2013, 14 or so, transitioned female to male. And when he became male biologically and hormonally through injections and whatnot, he shared with me some of the sexual differences, some of the things that were happening. And one of those things was like, and it was kind of funny because this is a very humorous person, but he was like, can you imagine having a clitoris with all these nerve endings and now getting testosterone shots? Like, I have a super micro penis, like kind of thing. Like, whoa, I never thought about that. Like, that must be really fun, like really fun to own. And just like, yeah, it's fun, and it gets me into trouble sometimes too. So you just think about, we think about these things as being weird, but or I shouldn't say we do, but like culture does, about these things being weird when you're not like the perfect storybook, traditional gender or family or whatever else, but there's so many beautiful variations of human identity and human sexuality and family and tribe and your, like you said, your inner circle. And it's like, why do we spend so much time judging? And I understand the labels now, especially like with millennials and whatnot, because they're like, we have a right to exist, and it's bringing awareness,
and it's allowing them to find themselves. It's allowing them to be able to create a container for themselves. So in that respect, I honor that right now. My hope is someday that's not going to be necessary, but right now it is necessary. Right now it's necessary to get the recognition and also to get the laws to support and keep them safe. My daughter is also, she's pansexual, and she has always been since she's a little girl, she's always told me that she likes both men and women. As she's gotten older, she realized she just likes everybody. She doesn't care what their gender is. So, really supporting her in that environment. And I want my child to be safe, like I hope every parent wants their child to be safe. So yeah, those labels are necessary right now because this is what's allowing us to start creating more legislation and more laws around protecting every person. So, and so, it is necessary right now. We probably won't in our lifetime see where the labels disappear, but I'm hoping at some point down the road that the labels get to disappear because you just get to be human. Right.
Right. Well,
and I also say, if I offend anybody, that's never my intention. I'm always here for growth. So if there's anything that I can do better for anyone who's watching this, you're always welcome to give me feedback. I always receive it, and I'm always willing to correct the way I say things or do things so that it is more inclusive. So I just want to put that out there as well.
Thank you.
Yeah. Because sometimes we get in these conversations and we forget, we may inadvertently, based on also our sociological training that we're sometimes not even conscious of, that we're both doing our work on, that may still come out, that may be offensive to someone, and it's never intended that way. And I'm always open to growth and doing better. So just making sure that anyone knows that they can say, hey, that was really uncomfortable for me, and diving into that and seeing how I can actually find new words for that, or new descriptions, or new ways to come about that that's more inclusive. But as we're talking about the female anatomy tonight, this is obviously about cisgender, but also can be transgender, because they are going to have a lot of similarities in their anatomy now, and just getting to know what it is. So it's really important. So now, just having that basic. So one of the books that I recommend is The Women's Anatomy of Arousal. That's amazing. For anyone who wants to learn how to please a pussy better, there's a great book out there called She Comes First, and it's actually written by a male sex therapist about how men and women can form better cunnilingus and why it's so necessary. Why cunnilingus, or basically licking a pussy, is so important for pleasure of a woman, how it gets her fully aroused, and all the things that need to happen. So as we look at our bodies for women, right? So if you look at the outside, like you said, our vulvas are super sensitive. Our vulvas are basically like roses. They're like rose petals. And if you come at it really hard, it's just going to disintegrate, right? So we have to allow that build up. And how do we do that? We touch different parts of women's bodies. We have all these erogenous zones. Our nipples are attached to the vagus nerve that attaches to the clitoris. So we can actually have orgasms with nipple play if you really want to play with it. It takes a lot longer, but women can actually learn how to orgasm in their vulvas, in their clitoris, with nipple stimulation. We can ejaculate. We can have all these deep orgasms from all these different parts of our vagina and vulva. So we have nerves everywhere, and every woman's different. So where my clitoral cluster is might be slightly to the left, slightly to the right for a woman. Generally speaking, we have our clitoris has a bundle of nerves so if you're looking at it, if you're looking down at yours, it's going to be like a clock, and it's going to be just slightly to 2 o'clock. So if you're a man or woman or anybody that's looking at your partner's vulva, then on the clitoris, just slightly like the 2 o'clock position, you pull back the hood a little bit. Right in that spot is actually a very sensitive part that as you stimulate it more, it starts to open up that cluster and make those more expansive in the clitoris for even more pleasure.
So it's a nerve cluster that's at 2 o'clock. That's why, like with oming, the orgasmic meditation, they say that 2 o'clock spot. But then I feel like for me, I'm like goofy foot or something. I feel like it's the other side. Is that possible? Or is it just my own mental oppositional defiance?
Every woman is different. I was a practitioner of orgasmic meditation, and it totally woke my pussy up. But I find for me, when I'm in self-pleasure, I actually find that I have more pleasure on my right side of my clitoris.
That's what I'm saying. It's so when you're facing, well, actually, okay, is it our 2 o'clock or the partner's 2 o'clock? If your
partner's 2 o'clock, you would be slightly to the left.
So it's the left side, but right side. Yeah, I know. I'm with you. Yeah, I'm with you. Right side. That's the thing. Yeah. But it's maybe
the reason why it's so important to know your anatomy is because if you're and the number one thing that I teach women is don't allow anything near or inside of your beautiful, what is also in Sanskrit called yoni, which literally translates to sacred space,
Mhm.
in there unless you get her permission. This
Mhm.
is something you and I've talked about, is getting permission from her first,
Mhm.
making sure she's a full 100% yes before self-pleasure, before doing a jade egg, before having sex, before inserting a menstrual cup, before putting in a tampon or disc or anything. Just always asking her permission. Is it okay that this goes inside of you right now?
Mhm.
And she's so innately wise. Like, this is her, for us, it's like her second brain. And she
Mhm.
will say yes. So some women may have experienced it. Some women may have actually met some guy or some girl and thought, oh, they're so sexy. And really they may be toxic for them. And immediately they get a yeast infection before they can go anywhere near that person. Like, just like that. They're like, what?
Mhm.
That's your pussy saying, hell no.
Yeah,
I know you're not listening to me. So I'm going to go ahead and just make sure you can't.
I'm gonna force it.
So,
Yeah.
so wise, so wise. And this is when what happens is we start creating trauma when we're having rough sex without being fully aroused. We can handle rough sex when fully aroused.
Right.
So, not allowing that to
And it's
occur unless it's
100%
a
yes.
full yes. Yes, because otherwise, what starts happening is there's little mini traumas happening inside the tissues, which then starts to create numbing,
Right.
and then you're numbed out and you're not feeling that. Another thing is just using a vibrator too often. It starts to create a clitoral addiction to the vibration. It starts to desensitize and damage your nerve endings so that you lose some of your sensitivity and you're not able to really feel all the sensations. So coming out of that, it might take a long time, but then learning how to gently touch, and you may feel nothing for like 3 months, might be like, just I feel nothing, I feel nothing. Then all of a sudden she slowly starts to wake up again. I can feel that. I can feel that so much. Oh my gosh, that's like spreading warmth through my whole vulva. Oh my gosh, that's spreading warmth through my whole pussy. So taking a step back from the intensity and allowing your pussy to heal and allowing her to wake up again and
And I've heard
allowing that
women
to bring
say
in
that
pleasure.
I've heard women say that even about like their own when they're self-pleasuring, even the vigorous rubbing, like they say I can only come from vigorous rubbing, and it feels like it's still some of that desensitization probably
Yes, because right, and for some of those women, it may not be anything to do with having a vibrator. That may have to do with emotional trauma or sexual trauma of some kind. They may have been abused. They may have had a bad experience that has affected them emotionally, and then also physically. They may have had an injury, like I actually at 2 years old was jumping from my bed to my toy box, and I slipped and I landed on my toy box had like this extra like part that stood up. I slipped and I actually split my skin open in my vulva and
oh,
actually caused myself damage, right? So with that being said, like that memory was in there. They had to do some work around that. I have some numbing in there from that. Because even though I was 2 years old, I still remember how painful that was. I still remember my mom having gauze on me and having to go to the doctor and letting that heal. So something as simple as that can cause trauma in a woman's body that she doesn't remember mentally, but it's still stored in our tissues. Our body has memory, and that can cause the desensitization where they need to have much stronger stimulation. So it's not always about sexual abuse. That is a huge factor in it, or some kind of sexual trauma, childbirth that's traumatic, that causes a lot of damage. Any of that can cause physical and physical damage, but then also is physiological, mental, spiritual, and that also has to be acknowledged and really worked on and healed in order for sensitivity to come back. So it's so much deeper than just, okay, let's just rub here and be more gentle. And, there's going to be some mental stuff for some women that they're going to have to really get help for that first before they can even address the numbness.
there's so many layers to unwind, and I'm speaking as a therapist now too. It's and somebody who has healed from sexual abuse as well. And even what you were saying about
Yeah.
like the nipple stimulation, and for me that being an area that was numb for many many years because it was an area that was a target of
Yeah.
of that sexual abuse. And it's just like how wise of the body to turn off that unwanted feeling, that unwanted touch, right, by dissociating or by numbing out. But
Yeah.
now you're wanting to reclaim it, and it takes a lot of unwinding and unworking to be able to reclaim that. But once I finally did, it was like, whoa, this is a powerful sensation. So I
Yes.
totally get that. And I did not think, I mean, in my PhD, I study about the vagus nerve, and this is how sexuality really fits in with my PhD topic, which is why I'm studying spiritual sexual empowerment for my PhD dissertation. But I
Yeah.
didn't specifically think about that attached to the nipples. And this is why I love talking to folks like you who are doing the real work with people, the clinical work that does not translate over into the research so often. Or if it does, it's like, well, that was such a small exploratory study, it doesn't really mean anything. And that's the academic kind of viewpoint.
Yeah.
It's like you have to have 50 of these big randomized controlled trials to even have it be validated. And what's that about, So it's like, yes, speaking as a PhD researcher and as somebody who's earning a PhD, it's important. Academics is important, research is important, protocols and linear stuff is important. And it's not by any means the authority or the end all be all. And we really have to look at this experiential work too. And I wanted to ask you, sort of related to that, about pH, because that is a very biological thing. And I don't know of anywhere I've had it written in any kind of, again, literature or a book, or maybe like some of the sexual clinicians are writing about this, but not researchers are not writing about, like, if he's bad for you, it's going to throw your pH off or whatever. So let's talk about
Yeah.
what happens, because you already mentioned the body is so wise that if somebody's
Yeah.
toxic for you energetically, that you could develop an immediate yeast infection. And I know that happened. I've had that experience.
Yes. Oh,
Several
me too.
times. So I know what you're saying. And I know that once that person is gone, like, so are the yeast infections. That what's a yeast infection? Like, it's just not even,
Right.
it's not even happening. So
Right.
with the pH, which a yeast infection can be an extreme example of that pH fluctuation, but knowing that yoni space, that sacred space, is so very sensitive to, I mean, even like
Yeah.
perfume, we should not be using scented soaps or scented, I mean, can you,
All that should
scented
be used,
tampons, like all
all that should be used to wash your pussy is warm water. That's it. Even cold water feels good. That's it. Just a rinse of water. You don't need anything else. You don't need soap. You don't need summer's eve. You don't need any of that. So, using all of those things actually knocks your pH balance off and causes serious infection. You talk to a gynecologist, the first thing they'll say is stop using that crap, because what's being told in media, right, is, oh, your scent smells. Like a woman's pussy has a scent to it, so cover it up with these perfumed pH balancing products. But every woman has their own scent, and their scent. Now, if you have very common, and this is there's so much shame around this, right? So bacterial vaginosis is a prime example. That gives you kind of a fishy smell. That literally is a pH imbalance. That is not a sexually transmitted disease. Now, you having multiple partners can cause a pH imbalance because each partner has, if you're using, even if you're doing protected sex, each person's body or the lubrication or the latex, it changes your pH balance because they have their own bacteria that's natural to their bodies. They're introducing into your body, and your body's not accustomed to it yet. So you can get where you're with a great partner who is good for you and get yeast infections and bladder infections. So number one, with bladder infections, frequently those are caused because women may not be wiping properly, or even more than that is getting very unromantic here. Urinate before sex and urinate directly after sex, or maybe even if you're prone to them, pausing in the middle of sex and going to urinate, to go pee, and then coming back, because this is flushing out, keeping the bacteria from moving up into the bladder, because that's what happens with the pushing. It starts pushing bacteria in there, and if you're having a lot of sex with someone that's a new partner, that can push that bacteria. Other forms of getting yeast infection, bladder infections for women is thongs. Thongs are a huge culprit of that. So you have this underwear that goes up through your butt cheeks and it rubs up against your anus and it moves as you move. So it's pulling the E. coli bacteria forward into your bladder. So just being aware that maybe even changing your panties a couple of times a day. I mean, it seems kind of extreme, but if you're someone who really battles with bladder infections, that could be a culprit. wearing clothing that doesn't have proper ventilation that allows bacteria to grow, and then it gets up into your urethra and up into your bladder. So just becoming more aware of like your environment and knowing that like it just has to be better cared for as far as more frequent underwear changes, maybe even rinsing yourself off with water and wiping from front to back to remove some of that bacteria, making sure that you pee before, maybe during and after sex, just to make sure it's flushed, you know, keeping that cleaned out. Your pH balance can get knocked off with new partners, with multiple partners. It doesn't mean that you're dirty. It doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. Your pH, your body, the woman's vagina is so incredible. It's a self-cleaning oven, right? So it produces, so the Skene's gland, your uterus, all that has special discharge that actually helps wash out the vagina. So it's its own oven. Its pH balance is acidic. And it actually makes it like a hostile environment for sperm, so that's why arousal also is important, because if we get really aroused, we create more of this mucus kind of lining, this, like they call it actually vagina sweat, because that's what it's called, vagina sweat. So sexy. And that actually kind of coats the vagina to allow the sperm to get up there and to kind of avoid some of that acid that like literally attacks the sperm and kills it off. So it's very hard to get in there. But our bodies, so women who are douching, I just ask you, please stop douching, because what you're doing is you're washing the bacteria up further into your vagina when your vagina is naturally flushing it out. So you're going to flush out, you're going to have a natural odor. If it smells fishy, that's not because, and that's I hate that joke when women are like, men are like, why does the ocean smell like fish? Oh, it's because the woman went swimming in it. That's like such bullshit, right? So that's really about, we do have that, but that means that there's a pH imbalance, and they like to give you all this medication for it. And it just messes up your gut's bio health. It messes up your pH balance. And really, honestly, the best thing I found is like boric acid suppositories, tea tree suppositories. Those are all things that naturally attack that extra bacteria that's just grown over, right? We have natural bacteria in there. It just kind of overpopulated, and it puts your vagina back into pH balance. That actually gets rid of it. So you can get boric acid for suppositories for women on Amazon or at Sprouts or Whole Foods or any of those natural stores. They usually carry like the boric acid suppositories, or they're like little capsules, and you stick it as far up into your vagina as you can. And I usually recommend it overnight because it starts to dissolve. So you want it to sit in there and do its work. That gets rid of bacterial vaginosis. It gets rid of yeast infections. Now, if you have chlamydia, gonorrhea, any kind of sexually transmitted disease, infection, that does have to be unfortunately treated with medical. You can't heal that naturally. A lot of them are superbugs now, so they do need a really strong antibiotic. But if you do that, then I just really recommend that you can actually get prebiotic suppositories. So you look for a pH balanced prebiotic that you can actually insert inside every night while you're on these antibiotics, that will help continually put, good quality bacteria and flora in there to keep it balanced while you're getting rid of the infection. So just allowing proper health, and just leave her alone. Don't put scents in her. Don't put douches inside of her. Allow her to do her flushing. Just rinse with water. Don't add any soap to it. Just, water, and just gently cleansing her with the warm water in your hand that's enough. Like, that's all I do. If you have a scent that is stronger, it's probably your natural scent. If it's lighter, it's a natural scent. Mine, I've been told, smells kind of like a vanilla kind of caramel type smell. Every woman has a different smell, and your partner's going to find it delicious. It's not supposed to be scentless. We have our own smell. That's what attracts our partners to us, is our scent and our taste. So it's natural, and it's supposed to be there. It's only if it's really foul smelling that you realize, and that's your body's way of saying, hey, there's something not right in here. We need to address it and make sure that she's healthy. Another little trick that works really well too, if women can't get a hold of boric acid, is I highly recommend organic only. It doesn't work the same if it's conventionally grown, as organic garlic. Oh, wow. So you can actually crush the clove, make sure it's peeled, crush the clove a little bit, or even if it's really bad, cut it in half. You insert that inside of your vagina as far as you can at night, Do that for 3 days to 7 days, and it'll actually help heal up the yeast infections.
Well,
So I don't know about BV, but it definitely works for yeast infections. And speaking of that, for women, so the reason why it's so important to be really connected to your pussy and to do the work to heal her if necessary is because it is also directly correlated with your vocal cords. It's the only parts of your body that has the exact same epithelial cells.
Mm,
And if you insert garlic inside, within 3 seconds, you taste it in your mouth.
wow. That's crazy.
It's completely connected to our voice.
Well,
So
and
if we're not speaking our truth,
mhm.
we're not speaking our truth. We're not living in our
Speak
truth.
it for us.
Right, right. She's so
Yeah.
powerful. She's
Yeah.
connected to she's so powerful that she's connected to our voice.
Well, and I've had shows, I had Kirti on before, and we've talked about how the second and fifth chakra are connected energetically. So
Yes.
it's interesting to hear you say this in a more biological way. You know, she's speaking energetically, and
Yeah.
I mean, we know it's connected. So this totally makes sense. But
Yeah.
I'm just so yeah. So this is like the biological stuff, and also what people should know about you is you're also very clean with your nutrition. I know you eat clean, you're organic, you're really, you're using supplements, probiotics, these sorts of things. So that's you in particular, and myself am that way as well. We're looking at the overall terrain. So of course, one little area is also going to be
Right. If you're eating fast food every day, right. If you're eating fast food and you're eating processed food every day, that completely affects the health and well-being of your pussy. So really being aware of that, having a clean diet, eating plant-based food, whole foods.
Mm-hmm.
Stop. If it comes in a box, don't buy it. Don't eat it. Make sure that it's something that is high quality, organic, especially in the US. For me, like I have celiac disease. I only eat organic because they have pesticides that contain gluten. So we don't know what's in the pesticide. And these also change your hormones. So you want to just eat as clean as possible whenever possible, because it's not only about your health and well-being and longevity, but it's total health. It actually affects your pussy, and it does change your smell. If you're eating a lot of beautiful, fresh, dark leafy greens and vegetables and fruit, it makes you taste better. It makes you smell better.
Mm-hmm. And
That's why I used to always.
I've read that specifically about celery and celery juice, which I didn't put that together, but then I was thinking about, I was like, yeah, I think that's true. I think that is true.
Yeah, it is. It's true, because it definitely shifted. I always felt that I smelled good, but I smelled really good. And I don't have hardly any body odor now from being all plant-based. And right now at this time, I'm not eating meat, but there's times when I do. Mm-hmm. But when I do, I'm a big advocate because I'm also a certified health coach. So I really do talk about holistic nutrition as well. And I'm a huge advocate in you learning what works for your body. Right. And so if you're someone whose body needs animal products, that's actually okay. But what I really highly encourage and invite my clients to do is to look at the most sustainably sourced. Make sure that you're not eating the fear of that animal. Make sure that they treat them well, that they're slaughtered well. They're not something that is coming from a slaughterhouse where they've just been cruelly treated through their whole lives. You're going to eat that fear. You're going to eat those emotions and those chemicals too, the chemicals that they produce from the fear. So that affects you negatively. So making sure that if you do eat animal products, they're sustainably sourced as possible, so that there's a cleaner energy that you're ingesting in your body.
Sure.
So
and that
I'm not someone to say don't eat this, don't eat that, because every body is different, and what's medicine for one can be poison for another. And if your body needs the meat, then your body needs the meat. But just learning what really works for you and making sure it's the highest possibility that you can put in your body, because it does affect your gut health, your brain, for women, our pussies, it affects all of that.
Right. And it kind of leads me back to the energetics of what you said about pH attracting, or like letting you know if a partner is good for you or not. It's sort of like you mentioned that with pheromones, you're going to be attracted to the smell, but also like if somebody's no good for you, if you're on top of all this health stuff and your pH still keeps getting knocked out, Like what's happening
Yeah.
there energetically.
Right. Now it's time to like connect in and say hi to her and say, tell me what's like, be willing to listen. So, and there's times when my pussy is like, I want him now. I'm like, no, he's no good for us. And I know you want to have fun tonight, but you know, we're going to end with a yeast infection tomorrow and we're not going to feel good. And he's going to end up just frustrating us to no end. He's not going to even do what we want him to do anyway. Like, you know, my, like, and she's like, okay, but I really wanted his penis tonight, you know? So, or, oh, I really wanted to fool around with her, you know? So it just really like, it's sometimes like she wants to be the full yes. And, you know, the rest of your body's like, no, hell no. And she's like, you know, so sometimes she tries to lead you a little astray and that's okay. So listen and let me find. And I actually I actually believe in the power of the pussy. Like I call on her, be like, hey, we need this. So figure out how to make that happen. And magic just happens, you know, like clear the way for the traffic or I need some money or, and just allowing the communication to commence, you know, women are like, oh yeah, whatever. It works. Really learning how to slow down and connect to the pussy.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I want to actually bring one of the exercises I gave you, which is pussy breathing.
Mm-hmm.
And how powerful that is. And for women, it will deepen the voice and bring it into the pussy. And when we talk from our pussies, everybody listens. So, you know, taking that exercise. So, you know, for those who are watching, it's called pussy breath. And you actually breathe in and out of your mouth deep into your pussy. And you have what's called a connected breathing. So it sounds like this. And taking that energy and you do that for as long as you can, bringing it down. I recommend at first maybe 5 minutes and you bring that energy down. So even rocking, so lay on your back or sitting up, inhaling, rocking your pelvis back or down towards the ground, exhaling, bringing it up so that you're really creating that movement and then just really seeing that energy just go into her and just that oxygen goes into the clitoris, it goes into the lips, goes into the whole entire vulva, goes up inside the vagina, into your womb, into your ovaries, like activating all that with all this energy of breath and letting it become aware. And then take a recording of your voice before that, and then take a recording of your voice after that and see how it shifts when you actually get down into your pussy and come from your power source. You know, and that's what I do. I work with women to really connect into their sexual power, which is deep in their pussy, and then how to just truly unshakably fall in love with themselves from that level. So no matter where they are in their lives, they come from that power source. Mm-hmm. And it's just endless energy connected to it once she's really connected to you.
Okay. Well,
such wisdom.
And you know, I had good results with that.
Yes.
But now I'm thinking maybe I need to do that before I go live. Maybe I need that before.
Yes.
I
yes. I actually do that breath work before I make any recordings. I do it before my clients. I do that as like my grounding and my power source. And I'll tell you what, it's like I go from scattered energy and having to try and focus to just showing up like, hey, I'm here to hold you now. Like, let's do this. And the wisdom that comes from that space of just being so grounded and deep in my, you know, and just opening up that root chakra. So for women, our Muladhara chakra comes from the opening of our cervix, right? So if we're in there breathing and opening that up, that opens that chakra. And that's the part of our cells, the Muladhara chakra is connected to it's actually connected to our survival, our sexuality, to our grounding, to where we relate on ourselves as human beings on this earth and in our physical bodies. Mm-hmm. So being able to start to focus on that. I myself do that work, and then every morning I wake up and the first thing I do is grab my jade egg and I do a jade egg practice before I get out of bed. Well, I get out of bed and I go back to bed and then I get out of bed. Mm-hmm. And even so, like this last week, I had a breakup around Christmas from someone I was seeing who was not healthy in the long run, and I had to end that relationship because my pussy said nope. She said nope, he's not gonna ever nourish us the way we need. And she's been a little numb. And that's the other thing too, is loving and accepting our pussies, whatever stage she's at. Maybe she's kind of burning, maybe she's tired, maybe she's numb, maybe you're not feeling a lot of desire. That doesn't mean you don't have the capacity for it, but it does mean having the ability to love and accept yourself where you are and come from that deep, deep power and love where you are. And as I'm doing my jade egg, my cervix is so sore. I'm just like, oh, as soon as she goes, my egg gets in there. It's like it sits on the opening of the cervix, and I'm like, oh wow, so sore. And it's like, yeah, she feels wounded. She feels a little wounded, and that's so just loving on her. So I've been doing like the most gentle jade egg practices I can, and really just honoring and being aware of like, yeah, you're tender. You're tender. You need a little extra TLC right now. We're gonna love on you and pay attention to you and acknowledge you and listen to you and give you that tenderness.
And we haven't talked about yoni eggs yet on the show that I know of. I know I plan to, but can you just say a little bit about that? Because I think
Yes.
it's so
So I use a jade egg. We have they're egg shaped, and they're made from different kinds of crystals and stones. And they some are completely solid, and some have like a little hole drilled. So I have two kinds. One has a hole that's drilled all the way through the entire egg. The other one is just drilled through the tip. Primarily what we do with the yoni egg is when you use that, it actually is a beautiful way to tone and reactivate your vagina. Maybe she's burnt out and tired. So this is a way to retone it, reactivate her in a gentle way. So it's kind of like most women don't do Kegels properly. So this is a way of going in there and activating those muscles and becoming acutely aware and becoming more sensitive and being able to eventually at some point in time feel the egg inside, and you can actually move it, change it. So they can come in all kinds of different crystals. I always find that if possible, really check in and see what she's resonating with. I cannot use rose quartz or amethyst at all. I suck up the energy of them and they literally shatter. So those can't go inside me. So what I use is a jade egg. I have two different jade eggs, and one of them is made from a different jade, and I've sucked the energy. It was dark green, and now it has, and I think I showed you, it now has like veins of white running through it because I have sucked up the energy of that stone. So there's different stones that have different like meanings or different types of functions. So like there you have jade eggs that go inside that are made from obsidian, and obsidian is going to pull all the dark negative energy. So you might have a really strong reaction to that, right? There's going to be some serious purging and clearing. So if you haven't done the work to prepare for that, I would say stay away from that. So
well,
you have to like
going on.
Yeah. I did warn you because you said you had an obsidian one, and I warned you about that.
That is my newest variety.
Yeah, you told me that you were getting one, and I said, okay, just be careful because it pulls all the darkest, deepest, like negative energy out of your body, and there'll be some serious purging that happens. So if you're not ready for that, that can like overwhelm you. Yeah. So playing with that, for most women, the safest one for them to get is the jade egg. The reason why there's a hole drilled inside of some of them. So if you're new to the yoni egg, so that's the egg that goes inside. Number one, you use the fatter end. So the bottom half of the normal egg, that goes up inside. The thinner one actually points downwards towards the opening. The ones that have little holes, you can actually get silk floss. So it's like a silk floss that's made from all natural silk. You can actually thread that through the yoni egg and then connect it, and that will allow you to gently pull it out. Because some women, once it's in there, your yoni base is like, I'm not letting this egg go, and it can take all of this work to get it out, and they freak out. Cannot get lost in there. Your cervix does not suck it up into your uterus. It cannot get lost. You just might have difficulty getting it out because you might clench around it, especially if you're new to it, right? So that allows them with the little thread, it allows you to be able to gently pull it out when you're finished with your practice. Or some women use that as resistance for like weight training, so they can actually pull and hold. So there's different things. So you can access.
Are you of the camp that you allow it to stay in for as long as it needs to and then it comes out, or do you give it a time?
I used to do that. You know what? I used to do that only, but now I check in with her and I ask her where she's at. And there's some days that as soon as I'm done with my practice and I stand up, she's like done and she releases. Now, as a woman who's new to the yoni egg, or if you're anywhere near your cycle, or you're having any kind of stress, or you're going to go out and have a night of drinking, then highly recommend that you leave that at home, because what will happen is you're out and about. I got my egg in, da da da. Something happens, she'll release, and then you lay an egg in public.
Oh
I've
yeah.
had that happen. Alcohol. So for once women don't realize, alcohol actually relaxes and weakens the pelvic floor muscles. So in those we didn't touch on, but we do have all these beautiful pelvic floor muscles that are all attached to our anatomy, right? So we have these muscles that hold everything in, and they also are part of the pleasure. You can learn to contract and relax them. So those will naturally hold it in. And if you're new to having a yoni egg, you can have a glass of wine. All of a sudden she's like, bloop. And I was sitting at the table at Tommy Bahama's, and I gently laid an egg. So, that can happen, and it happens. It actually happens to every woman who starts playing with the yoni eggs, that you think you're safe to go out in public. And then, so I just recommend, what I recommend is, if you're going to do that, make sure you're wearing like yoga pants or some form fitting pants where it doesn't have the ability to just fall down your pant leg. Don't wear a skirt where it can just fall. Really check to make sure it's a high quality. Whenever you are going to use it again, double check it. Make sure there's no cracks, there's no chips in it, because that can hold bacteria. Gentle ways of cleaning it is you can actually I just rinse it with good water, but you can actually put it in a cup of water and then just add a couple of drops of iodine to it, and that will sterilize it. But what I actually find is really easy is I have sex toy cleaner. So it's the special antimicrobial spray you spray on your toys after to get everything. So I just spray my egg with that and wipe it off, and then I know it's clean. So, there's more gentle ways. I don't recommend heat, because jade egg can handle it, because jade is very, very strong, and it can handle a lot. But some of the other stones cannot handle the heat, so then it could crack your egg. So you want to be very careful.
That makes sense.
So.
And I think one thing that I learned fairly recently, because I was taking this course in energy medicine, but I had heard of it spoken of before, is that when you apply pressure to a crystal, it releases energy. And so this is why we use crystals to power watches, and we use crystals to power printers, because it enhances the energy. It only needs a electrical charge, and then it sends this energy out. But for some reason, we think that with our bodies that these crystals aren't going to do anything, and it's just this silly thing that women are doing. But really, these different crystals, if it's a crystal and not, there's a difference between a crystal and a rock, right?
Right.
Actually, when the vaginal muscles are squeezing on it, it's applying that pressure. Or if you don't want to do yoni eggs and you want to use a meditation stone, you can put it in your hands and squeeze it too. But it is amplifying energy. That's what it's doing. And so if you imagine an orgasm as energy wave, and then you imagine a crystal inside amplifying that energy wave, it can be a really powerful practice. But it's not just for sexual pleasure. It's in the reason that
healing.
I've been more healing and emotional, and finding my voice, and cutting cords, and heal. Just like clearing out this womb space energetically from trauma and things like that. But I've found the practice to be really cool. But also then there's the biology part of it that we don't always know, because the medical doctors aren't on board with this stuff. So it's like,
they're like, don't use it, unbeknownst to them, this helps strengthen the pelvic floor. It helps deep cleansing of the body of any past traumas. It actually helps with incontinence. It helps with, I used to always have to cross my legs when I sneezed, because I was always having a little bit of pee spurt out if I laughed too hard, jumped too high, ran, sneeze. And since I use my yoni egg all the time, because I've had a couple of children, and since using the yoni egg, I don't really have those problems. I used to be where I'd have to go pee, and if I didn't go right then and there, I was going to pee my pants. And now I can hold it for a little while. So it's definitely strengthened my pelvic floor again, and brought sensitivity back. And and like you said, it definitely enhances pleasure. It creates more fluids, so you have more moisture, sensitivity, more muscle development, so you can really be more proactive in your sexual pleasure, being able to squeeze and release. You can even learn how to isolate the muscle that works with just your clitoris and just with the introitus, and then just with the inside and up by the cervix. You can isolate all that, learning how to just contract one side and then the other side. So all that is part of it. But for a lot of women, it's just deeply healing. And they do this thinking, and this is the other thing. So yeah, doctors don't know much of anything about that. Now, number one, we have to really take into account that scientifically speaking, most every study out there, they don't even use women. They're just now starting to be more, so almost all medications that are out there, they don't have studies on women. They do studies on men, and they do studies on rats that are male. And the female rats they purchased have been inbred so much that they've become like male rats. So they still don't have an accurate depiction of how an actual female, a woman's body is reacting to the doses of medication. Or so they don't know. They just want to like say this is what works for women. They don't know. They don't have research. They don't have any kind of knowledge of really how a woman's body is affected by medication, by treatments, by any of this. They don't do enough studies yet. It's just now science is starting to come aboard. There's a great book that I just recently read called The Better Half, and it's called Genetic Superiority of Women. It's written by a male doctor who is a geneticist, and actually I'm reading his other book right now that's about sex and what it's all about, and he's talking about sex and sexuality as well, coming from a genetic standpoint. And it's really interesting because he talks about that. He talks about the lack of study for women and how our bodies work. So he talked about how a woman got prostate cancer and had, the only reason why they found it is because her name was a unisex name, and they mistook that she was male. So when she went in for her physical, all of her lab slips had been labeled for a male. So they did all the blood work based on and as a male. And so they found elevated prostate hormones and said, well, and then they realized their mistake, but they said, well, how does she have elevated prostate hormones if she's a female? Right. So that's when they discovered that we have a prostate too, and she had prostate cancer. So that mistake saved her life, because they don't test for that, because women don't have prostates. Now they're discovering scientifically we do. So there's so much.
Know that in 2021 is like what we do know.
One thing we have to recognize with science and medical is that most of their research is over 20 years behind. Yeah. That is so behind. We keep evolving, and the science is just now catching up to a lot of things. Mm-hmm. So just really take it into account. Do your research. Mm-hmm. Follow your intuition. The doctors, they're practicing medicine. So, yes, they have degrees. Yes, they've studied for a long time. Yes, there's some very good doctors who know a lot out there. But I have a lot of physician friends, and I have had a lot of physician clients through the years as a massage therapist and health coach. And they'll be the first to admit, I'm practicing medicine. I don't know everything. Mm-hmm. So they, they're human. They basically know what research has given them. They only know what they can get their hands on. If there's no studies done, they don't know. So taking charge of your health, taking charge of if something doesn't feel right, double check it, especially when it comes to your sexual health, especially. So the jade egg has been around for thousands of years. And, the jade, I think you froze. Wait for you to come back. Well, this is still recording. The jade has been around for thousands of years. So even though science is saying don't do it, it's actually super good for you. For some women, though, you may not actually be ready for it. So it's okay to take it slow, and it's okay not to do it unless you feel like 100% you're ready for the emotional releases that will actually come with it. Hey, everybody, we lost her. So yeah, so it's something that can actually have some serious release. So if you are someone who's working on trauma, you're working on a lot of emotional issues right now, then the jade egg is something that you may not want to play with without getting some great guidance. I highly recommend, there's a website called beducated.com. So it's BEDED, so it's beducated. So it's BEDU. So just look it up. They're actually a wonderful sex education website. You can purchase their membership, and they have all these classes. And then another one that you can do is you can actually go on LaylaMartin.com. She has a Jade Egg program that you can purchase and actually do 6 weeks of this beautiful Jade Egg program. And she guides you through all the levels of the Jade Egg program and what it's about and how to get into the practices both spiritually as well as physically. So that's really good. So I guess we'll wait to see if she comes back. And if not, then I guess I ended this for her tonight. So I don't know if any of you have questions because I can't see anything. So we're just going to pause for a moment. Yeah, I wish I had that live on YouTube. Oh, maybe I can. Maybe you guys do have questions. Maybe I can see what's happening. Nope, I can't. So I guess if you have any questions too, you can always send them in to Natasha, and then I can always answer them, and then she can get back to you on that as well. And I don't know, I think she's been having some technical difficulty. She said Mercury's in retrograde. I think that's what she said. I'm not as knowledgeable in the horoscopes as she is. Yeah, so if that's the case, then, this is just fun for her. So I'm gonna just check in with her. I'm gonna actually be rude and text her and see if everything's okay. So I'm just checking with her, guys. So if you're here, gals, guys, anyone who's listening, persons, beautiful beings of light, whatever you like to be referred to as. So I'm listening, she said. Yeah.
So you froze and you didn't come back, and I was like, maybe.
All right, so I'm going to end this. I'm going to end this and see if we can get it back on. So we'll be back. Oh, hey, look. Just as I say that, I just been talking away. I just kept going.
Oh, good for you. Okay. Very weird. Something very weird just happened because you froze, and then I was talking to myself, and I said, I think it must just be your internet, because mine, I seem to be here. And then as soon as I said that, I disappeared. But guess what? It like closed my Zoom for me. They just decided it was going to close me. And then I looked, and my internet was totally knocked off. Like
Oh, wow.
The internet network disappeared, like literally before my eyes. And I was like, what is going on? And then it was doing weird things. And I look on my phone, and my phone is still connected to the internet.
Oh yeah, and I was still on live streaming for you, and I was going the whole time, and you were frozen, and then you just disappeared, and then I was just left to hang out.
And then when I went to text you to be like, sorry, I think something very weird just happened, like my text went through very quickly. I was like, did they just switch to like 5G in that moment or something? Like what
Maybe.
is going on right now?
I was like, she said something about Mercury retrograde. I'm not as knowledgeable in horoscope as you are, so I said,
Oh,
but
yeah,
I finished out the egg, and I gave them a couple of great resources, and then I just told them I was going to be rude and check my phone and see if you were going to come back or not, or if we had to end this. So people were entertained, I'm sure, if they were still there and I was still on.
Yeah, and it does look like it's still saying live on YouTube. So
yep, it's okay. As you can tell, I'm not a shy. I'm not a camera shy.
I know. I'm so thankful for that. You stole the show. Look at you go, got it. You stole the show. Yeah, I can see you now because I'm watching. It's got a little bit of a delay, so I can see it on YouTube, like right after us speaking. That's awesome. Well, yeah. I mean, we've been going for an hour and 45 minutes, so it's probably a good time to wrap it up anyway, but I didn't want to wrap it up without letting people know how to find you and what you have going on and I mean, I'm just so excited for you to start to really put your business out there on wherever you decide to, whether it's Instagram or wherever, because you are so good at what you do. And, you've been sort of my informal coach for years since we first met. And it's just been really fun to get to do these practice like play sessions with you, and
Yeah.
to just see how good it can get. Like, I don't have any big complaints or anything like that. It's just really wanting to explore deeper and see how we can create more health on the planet, how we can
Well, I think that's so important right there to touch on that. Is that so? What I'm doing is, sex, love, relationship coaching. I primarily focus on women. I focus on them connecting to their sexual power, their sexuality, and falling in love with themselves. And that sometimes includes talking about the relationships they're currently in or a relationship with themselves. Um, I'm actually just starting to redo my website because I've changed, because I was a massage therapist for so many years and I was health coach for many years. So that's like in the works of shifting over, because I just finished the specialized school, which really just gave me this official certification, most of what I was already practicing anyway. Um, but really important to touch on that is that if you are a woman who's been doing the work, that doesn't mean you don't need this, because sometimes we do all this work on, and I'm a walking example of that. We do so much work on ourselves, yet there's still this deep level that we can't get to without outside guidance.
Yeah.
And that's where I still have coaches, I still have therapists, because I'm doing the work day in and day out. I practice what I preach, and there's places that I can't get to without someone holding my hand or witnessing me and saying, "Hey, let's go there," because we all have patterns that, no matter how much we've done the work, we still have these deep, deep unconscious patterns that we have to uncover. That will say, "Oh, well, that's just a wall," and the outside person says, "No, actually, that's a door." What?
Mhm.
When did the door get there? So really honoring that you can be someone who's brand new to self work, but you can also be someone who's been doing that work for years. And most of the women that I work with are women who've been doing the work. They've done a lot of different kind of modalities. They've done a lot of different types of therapies, and they're ready to go just that much deeper into that level they haven't been able to get to. And that's where I take them. I take them to those deeper realms that they've been practicing, preparing, and doing the work to get to. So those are most of the women that I work with. If you're someone who, I generally don't work with women who are not body aware, because my superpower is that people dive deep very quickly with me.
Mhm.
And if you're someone who hasn't been doing the work and is not prepared for that, then it can be very overwhelming. And so I can recognize right away if you're someone who has the capacity for that yet. And if not, then I refer them out, because that's something they have to get the stamina for, and get the, like, you have to be able to build that capacity to hold that deep work that's going to start unfolding in front of you. And so if you're someone who has deep trauma, it's definitely important to see a trauma therapist first, and work on that trauma. If you're someone who's never connected to your body, you don't even know what a sensation is, then working with me may not be the right place, because I have a tendency to bring people deep, and you may not be ready for that. And that's okay. That's okay. We're all in our journeys. But if you've been doing the work and you're really ready to dive deep, then we go there. We get down into the depths and uncover the muck and find out what that golden light is underneath.
Yeah, and that's another good reason for this show, because this might be somebody's first introduction of what's possible, and what those deeper layers are that
Yes.
additionally aspire to. And if you're watching this right now and your mind is kind of blown, like, whoa, that's okay. Like, just pay
Yeah.
attention and see what's coming up in your body, and maybe it does highlight a different area that you can start on. And like you said, for those of you who have been doing the work for decades or years, it can be hard to find a practitioner who has not gone, or who has gone where you are going, or has gone further than you've already gone. The more personal growth work,
Right.
the more personal development growth you do, the smaller your peer group gets, the smaller the dating pool gets, the smaller your
Yes.
practitioners get,
Right.
because you have to find somebody that's kind of blazing that trail as well. So I really, really appreciate you for that too, for being, a fellow sister goddess on the path of wellness and personal growth and spiritual growth and sexual growth and all of the growth and all the synergistic, combinations of that. And it's been really lovely to be your friend and to benefit from your work and to share my work with you. So I
Yeah.
very much.
Well, they can find me on Facebook under Tara Cridland. I have different ones, but it's the Tara Cridland. And then if you see my my actual profile, says Tara Cridland Coaching on there, and my hair looks just like this, so it's easy to find. Also, you can and I do have an Instagram. Instagram. I'm so not social media savvy, so I'll get there.
Or it'll go away.
Okay. I love and accept myself anyway, regardless of my technological dinosaur challenges. But on Instagram, it is under Tara Cridland, Women's Empowerment Coach. And also they can email me at tara@taracridland.com. So Tara at Tara Cridland, CRIDLAND.com. So Tara, and it's TARA, just like the goddess spelling. So that's really important. And if there's anyone who is listening, their mind is blown. They're like, oh my gosh, there's so much information. 2 great starting points, great books, Come As You Are and Women's Anatomy of Arousal. Those are great books to just start learning about your sexuality and your body. Those are fantastic books. So Come As You Are and Women's Anatomy of Arousal. They both talk about, and they just simplify it, bring it down, lots of pictures. And there's even with the Come As You Are, there's even a workbook you can purchase to do the workbook with it to kind of get more familiar with all of your parts. And the Come As You Are also talks about how your body is related to your genitals and how your brain has brakes and accelerators. And this talks about all the different factors that enter into your desire and your sexuality, and how stress levels and sleep levels and all that can actually interfere with your sex drive. So she talks about all those things too. So starting, with this kind of work, it's always safer to start from the outside in. So learning about the outside and then slowly working in and being gentle with yourself and knowing you are exactly where you're supposed to be. And if you found this video and this intrigued you, this is because this is the right time that it's all lined up for you to just start your journey. You don't have to dive in for head first. It's okay, especially when it comes to sexuality, to dip in a toe and then your foot and go in slowly into the water. And don't overwhelm yourself, because there's so many layers to learning our bodies and learning our sexuality and learning our power, that it doesn't happen overnight, especially if you have not only trauma, but years and years of societal training and conditioning that we have to deprogram from our minds, from our bodies, about what a woman's role in this society is, what a woman's role is in this world, and our bodies and how they've been shamed and silenced and mutilated. You have parts of the world where women's clitoris has literally been cut off and their openings have been sewn shut. They're like just horrific things, and that kind of trauma to the body is intense. So just honoring that.
Yeah, and that's, for me, that's been the deeper work, is unwinding that, having a lot of trauma, once that's done, it's done. Now you're healing it. But when we live in these systems, we do the healing and then we re-experience it again tomorrow. And then we do the healing, re-experiencing a little micro tomorrow. So it's deeply unwinding, how it's all interrelated. And I just want to remind people that we do heal in spirals. So if you're like doing the sexuality work and then you bump up against a trauma, it doesn't mean that you're backsliding. And sometimes I even think that, like, oh man, it feels like I'm going backwards with, whatever issue it is that's coming up for me. But that's an okay.
Yeah, that thought of, oh my God, I've worked on this so many times.
Yeah, I think it's
oh my gosh, again, I'm so done with this. But it's a new layer of something that's similar, but still it's new. It's a new layer of that.
Now here's presentation 7.0 of this issue, this pattern that's been in your life. But I also wanted to say to people, if you Tara, aren't doing this deep trauma work with people, you're wanting them to go access that first. And I wanted to let our viewers and our listeners know that I do have a container for that. As a licensed marriage and family therapist, I have tons of experience with trauma. And I do a 12-week mind body skills group where people can come in with that into that container to specifically heal trauma, and then go and work with you if they
and that's really important to touch on, because as people start to dive in and work with coaches, if you have, and maybe some of them are not even aware of the trauma, it's okay if this trauma comes up and you realize you've got severe trauma or really deep trauma. It's okay to pause and go get help and come back once you have that work through or that healed a little. And so, yeah, I definitely, I'm not trauma trained. So I'm not comfortable holding space for someone who has severe trauma because I don't want to re-traumatize them. So the women I work with are pretty much okay. They may still have some trauma, but they've done a lot of work around it. They're able to hold and resource themselves and go through the trauma without re-traumatizing.
Right.
So that's really important for me to recognize. And when I see someone who is not, has not gotten help around their trauma, is very deep trauma, then I will refer them out, because that is something that is going to cause more harm than good than trying to dive in through a trauma that's not been addressed, let alone healed. Like, just not even that, but just not even addressed. Like, that can cause some serious damage. So really honoring that, and that knowing that if this exists, there's no shame in that. There's no shame in having trauma. There's no shame in getting help around the trauma. There's no shame then after that of getting more help around just even getting to know your body.
Right.
Reintroducing yourself to your body.
And if you're around people that are shaming you because of it, you're around the wrong people. You got to find a more healing and nurturing group of humans to spend your time.
Yeah. And really actually honoring that too. If you're someone who's in serious trauma, that means you don't really have strong boundaries. So if you're around people who are shaming you, it's because also your boundaries are being crossed because you don't know what your boundaries are. So learning those boundaries and then getting firm in those boundaries. So even with that, being gentle and knowing that it might take time for you to be able to have the knowledge and strength and skill set to eliminate the people that are shaming you and bring in people who are more supportive and loving, that also can take time.
And boundaries was last week's topic with Kirti. So it's all tying in. So I suppose we should wrap this up. If you're interested,
all connected.
Yeah, if you're interested in the Mind Body Skills groups, you can find more about that on my website, natashaedwina.com. Both Tara's and my websites will be in the caption here as soon as my virtual assistant Angel comes in and makes everything pretty and sprinkles her fairy dust all over it. Now you know where to find us, and please subscribe also to my newsletter, so that when I send out the links of these shows and notify you of all these other topics, I've been working really hard to put out a lot of really high quality, amazing content. So I just want it to be witnessed, to be seen.
Yes.
To you. And obviously I love connecting with and having these conversations even personally. So it was just a pleasure to finally have you on. And I hope that we get to do this again soon.
Yeah, and also just being a testimony for you too. I've had your hypnotherapy sessions, and I've done some work with you as a professional as well, and just witnessing the depth that you can hold someone and really going there. And I had some big releases with you. So I actually, the last time we did the hypnotherapy is when I also packed up and moved to Florida from Vegas.
Okay.
So really just tooting your horn too, that you are a phenomenal therapist, and that it's been a real pleasure not only being your friend and colleague, but also experiencing what it's like to be one of your clients. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you very much. I very much appreciate it. And I look forward to talking with you again soon. And hopefully some folks will be coming your way too.
Yeah, absolutely. Once I get my new website up and running, I'll have that posted.
All right. Amazing. Well, enjoy the sunshine. I am a bit jealous that it's 60 degrees here and it's 80 degrees where you're at, but I know you're soaking up enough sun and pleasure for both of us. And hopefully I will be up.
Yeah, as you can tell, I got a little bit of a sunburn because I went to the beach a couple of days ago.
Whatever.
Yeah, this is an outside outfit because it's too hot to wear a long sleeve for sure.
I'm looking forward to those days.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. Good night, goddess. Sleep well. Thank you very much.
Good night.